In the distant future, humanity had faced countless alien empires and technological marvels, but few had seen anything like the Asterian autocracy, known across the stars for its brutal caste system. The autocracy ruled with an iron fist, fueled by advanced AI-driven soldiers and bioengineered super soldiers known as Commandos. But even among their ranks, one name was whispered with reverence and fear: the immortal Steel Commando. The human colonies on the fringes of autocracy space were used to being ignored. Resources were scarce and they offered little threat. That changed with the arrival of an unexpected guest, an ancient, nearly indestructible autocracy commando. Calling himself the Steel Commando, he arrived clad in battle-worn armor so advanced that even the autocracy had lost the knowledge to recreate it. His name was Kale Drainer, once human, now more machine than flesh, and he claimed to have fought in a war against the autocracy itself over 100 years ago. Chapter 1: A Ghost in the System. Kale arrived at the colony's gates without warning. He was a relic of a long-lost war monument to the autocracy's ruthless attempts to secure dominance over the galaxy. No one knew why he had survived, or how he had been able to keep his memory intact, but the evidence was written in the scars of his worn, dented armor and the unwavering gaze behind his visor. But Kale's mere presence wasn't the most shocking thing. It was his mission. "I've come to help," he said, voice as cold and unyielding as the metal that encased him. "The autocracy is moving this way. You have 3 weeks to prepare." The colony's governor, a hardened miner named Jessa Thorne, was reluctant. Rumors of autocracy commandos defecting were whispers at best. A defector was usually caught and terminated within. How sure could this ghost of a soldier have lasted so long? "Why should we trust you?" Jessa challenged, her face set in steely resolve. "You're one of them. You've killed hundreds, maybe thousands. What makes you think we need your help?" The Steel Commander removed his helmet, revealing a face far too human to ignore. There were lines there, etchings of age and pain that no machine could fake. A strange, sorrowful look settled in his eyes. "Because I wasn't made to conquer," Kale said. "I was made to protect. That is a purpose no autocrat has ever managed to strip from me. They want to take your home. I intend to help you keep it." Chapter 2: Preparing for War. Reluctantly, the colony accepted Kale's offer. Word spread quickly, and soon, volunteers began arriving from every corner of the settlement. Farmers, miners, engineers, all drawn by the promise of learning from one of the galaxy's most fearsome warriors. Kale became a relentless trainer, drilling them on autocracy tactics, setting up ambushes, and using the rocky terrain to their advantage. "Don't think of yourselves as weak," Kale said to his ragtag militia. "The autocracy breeds fighters, but it's built on obedience. They never expect a real resistance." The colony's blacksmiths and engineers worked tirelessly to reinforce their makeshift weapons, while Kale lent his knowledge of autocracy tech, rigging up traps and jerry-rigging shields from scavenged metal. During training one evening, Jessa pulled him aside. "You were once one of their greatest soldiers. Why did you leave?" Kale paused, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "I was made to protect humans, but the autocracy twisted that purpose. They used us to conquer to turn peaceful planets into graveyards. After one too many of those, I realized I couldn't be part of it anymore. I escaped, knowing they would never stop hunting me." He looked away, his eyes hardening. "This is my chance to fight for something real." Chapter 3: The Immortal Battle. As predicted, the autocracy's forces arrived right on time. A small battalion of commandos and automated drones, led by a powerful AI overseer. They descended on the colony, prepared for a swift and decisive victory, but they hadn't counted on Kale's unorthodox defense or the fierce resistance of the people he had trained. From every corner of the colony, the autocracy forces met traps and resistance. Kale led the charge, his armor deflecting shots that would have vaporized a lesser soldier. The colonists fought by his side, forcing the enemy into choke points, ambushing them from above, and refusing to give ground. At the heart of the battle, Kale confronted the AI overseer. It recognized him immediately. "Commando Unit 0467 Kale, you are in direct violation of the autocracy's directives," it stated, its synthetic voice cold and unfeeling. "I serve humanity, not the autocracy," Kale replied, leveling his blaster at the machine. In a flash, Kale and the overseer exchanged fire. Shots pinged off his armor as Kale charged, using every ounce of his superhuman strength and reflexes to dodge the AI's attacks. In one final, brutal move, he overpowered the Overseer, tearing its central core from its frame, and watching as its systems failed in a shower of sparks. The Overseer's defeat sent a wave of confusion through the Autocracy forces, disrupting their coordinated attack. Sensing weakness, the colonists pressed the advantage, routing the remaining soldiers and drones with renewed vigor. Chapter 4, A New Beginning. When the dust settled, the colonists gathered around Kale, their makeshift hero battered but unbroken. He surveyed them, a quiet pride evident beneath his stoic exterior. He had found something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging. The Autocracy would return. He knew that much, but for now, they had a chance to fortify, to prepare, and perhaps, to inspire other colonies to resist as well. Kale Drainer, the immortal Steel Commando, had become more than just a weapon. He was a symbol of hope. Jessa approached him, extending her hand. You've given us more than just a chance to survive. You've shown us that even in the face of the Autocracy, we can stand tall. Kale clasped her hand firmly. Then let's make sure the next time they come, we're ready. As the colonists cheered, Kale allowed himself a rare smile. For the first time in a century, he wasn't fighting to survive or escape. He was fighting to protect, to build, to reclaim his humanity one battle at a time. The Steel Commando, Kale Drainer, had given the colony a taste of hope and a glimpse of resilience. But as the echoes of victory faded, they realized they had caught the attention of an empire notorious for stamping out rebellion before it could spread. Kale knew better than anyone, the Autocracy didn't tolerate defiance, especially not from a former asset. 3 months had passed since their first encounter with the Autocracy's forces. The colony had grown stronger, but each passing day brought a growing sense of dread. Scouts reported increasing Autocracy patrols in the nearby sectors. It was only a matter of time before a full battalion was deployed to quell their uprising. As Kale trained the colonists, an old comm signal crackled to life in the colony's main square. The scrambled message was from the Resonance, a rumored colony ship hidden in the fringes of space, full of displaced humans and refugees escaping Autocracy space. Chapter 1, A Desperate Call. The voice on the other end was urgent, almost frantic. This is Commander Elias Vega of the Resonance. We're under siege by Autocracy warships. Any human forces able to assist. We request immediate aid. Coordinates are being transmitted with this signal. Jessa and Kale exchanged a glance, tension crackling in the air. The colonists have barely held off one small Autocracy force. Assisting another colony would leave them vulnerable to counterattacks. But Kale's expression was firm. If we don't help them, we're next. The Autocracy won't stop until every last human settlement is brought to its knees. We either stand together, or we fall alone. Chapter 2, Journey to the Resonance. Gathering a team of the best-trained fighters from the colony, Kale and Jessa prepared to depart. Their mission was twofold: help the Resonance fend off the Autocracy, and forge an alliance with the other human colonies who were scattered and unorganized. Kale knew that to stand a chance, humanity would need to unite against the Autocracy's overwhelming power. The journey to the Resonance was perilous. Kale's small crew had to navigate through asteroid fields and avoid Autocracy patrols that seemed to swarm like predators sensing blood in the water. Every nerve was on edge, but Kale's presence inspired confidence. If he could face down an Overseer and live, they reasoned, then they too could defy the odds. When they finally arrived, they found the Resonance under heavy fire. The massive ship was riddled with scorch marks, its engines struggling to stay operational as it maneuvered through the wreckage of its fallen defense drones. Autocracy warships loomed in the distance, bombarding the vessel mercilessly. Kale wasted no time. He coordinated a strike, leading his team in a surprise assault on the Autocracy warships. Their smaller ships darted through the chaos, hitting weak points with pinpoint accuracy. Under his command, the colonists fought with an intensity that rivaled trained soldiers. The tide of the battle began to shift. Chapter 3, Unity in Desperation. After hours of fighting, the Autocracy warships withdrew, regrouping to avoid further losses. The Resonance, though damaged, was still intact. Commander Elias Vega, a sharp-eyed woman with an air of authority, met Kale and Jessa in the Resonance bridge. "You saved us," Elias said, her voice filled with relief and gratitude. But why? You risked your entire colony to come here. We're all in this together, Jessa replied, glancing at Kale. If one colony falls, we all do. Eli studied Kale with curiosity. I heard rumors of a rogue commando, but I didn't believe them. Not until now. Her gaze softened, and she extended a hand. Join us, help us organize the colonies. Together, we could be a force the autocracy can't ignore. Kale accepted her hand, his grip firm. That's the plan. The autocracy's strength is their unity under tyranny. We'll match it with unity born of freedom. Chapter 4, Operation Ghost Echo. Days turned to weeks as Kale and the colonists integrated with the Resonance crew. Together, they hatched a bold plan, Operation Ghost Echo. The idea was simple but dangerous: infiltrate the autocracy's central communication hub and upload a virus that would disrupt their ability to track and target human settlements. The mission required a small team to infiltrate the heart of autocracy's space. It was almost suicide, but Kale volunteered without hesitation. He knew the autocracy's protocols, understood their weaknesses. Jessa and allies insisted on joining him. As they approached the autocracy's communication hub, disguised as a supply vessel, Kale activated the code scramblers and slipped their ship past the security grid. Once inside, they faced wave after wave of robotic guards, but Kale moved like a ghost, guiding Jessa and allies through the labyrinthine corridors, avoiding detection wherever possible. They finally reached the central core, where Kale began uploading the virus. The team held their breath as the virus infiltrated the system, overwriting protocols, creating false coordinates, and scrambling identification codes. The autocracy's entire network would be thrown into disarray. But just as the upload reached completion, an alarm blared. We're compromised, Kale said, his voice tense. We need to get out, Mel. Chapter 5, The Price of Freedom. Fighting their way out, Kale and the team were cornered by an elite squad of Autocracy Commando. Kale's former brothers-in-arms, the lead commando, Zorek, recognized Kale immediately, his face contorted with anger. You betrayed the autocracy, Kale. You disgraced us. Kale held his ground, his voice steady. I refuse to betray my purpose. We were meant to protect Zorek, not enslave. A brutal battle ensued, metal clashing against metal as the two commandos fought with lethal precision. Kale fought with everything he had, knowing that failure would mean the end of all they had worked for. But as Zorek landed a near-fatal blow, Jessa and allies intervened, launching a synchronized attack that finally brought Zorek to his knees. Wounded but alive, Kale led them back to the ship. They blasted away from the hub just as explosions rocked the structure, and the autocracy's once flawless communication network fractured into chaos. Epilogue: The Rising Tide. The autocracy's once feared reach was faltering, its communication networks crippled, and colonies across the outer rim were beginning to stir with newfound hope. However, the autocracy's emperor, known as the Supreme Executor, had taken notice. Rumors began to circulate that he was deploying the Judicators, a brutal faction of enhanced commandos loyal only to him, tasked with eliminating high-profile threats to the autocracy, and Kale Drainer was now at the top of their list. As Kale helped forge alliances between human colonies, training fighters and securing resources, the shadow of the Judicators loomed ever closer. Their arrival was inevitable, and Kale knew that humanity's best chance lay in uniting its scattered colonies into a single, self-sustaining force strong enough to withstand the full wrath of the autocracy. Chapter 1, Rallying the Colonies. Kale and his allies, Jessa Thorne and Commander Alice Vega, embarked on a mission that took them to the farthest reaches of human-controlled space. Kale spoke in colony forums, on ship bridges, and in underground bunkers, urging the colonists to join their resistance vanguard. As they traveled, Kale's reputation as the immortal Steel Commander continued to grow. Stories spread of his bravery, his battles against the Overseers, and his defense of the Resonance colonies that had once been fractured by distance and distrust now had a common cause, a symbol of hope that transcended borders. At one stop, Kale met a young engineer named Thad, a tech genius who managed to develop cloaking devices from autocracy scrap. Thad approached Kale, eyes alight with excitement. I've been working on a prototype for a stealth frigate, he said. holding up a holographic model of his design. If we can build a fleet of these, we could strike at the autocracy's inner worlds undetected. Kale placed a hand on Thad's shoulder, nodding with approval. We'll need every edge we can get. Start a team to get these into production. The Vanguard will be the spearhead of our liberation. Chapter 2: The Judicator's Approach. Not long after forming the Vanguard, Kale's scouts reported that the Judicators were closing in. These soldiers were unlike any the colonies had encountered before battle hardened, augmented, and utterly ruthless. They had a reputation for psychological warfare, breaking their targets before delivering the final blow. Kale gathered his closest allies and laid out a plan. The Judicators would be expecting a desperate defense, so he decided to give them something far different, a relentless offensive. Kale proposed luring them into the Hardon Expanse, a region of volatile asteroid fields and deadly radiation pockets. It was treacherous terrain, but Kale knew it better than anyone. This would be their battlefield. As they prepared, Jessa approached Kale. "These Judicators, they're different, aren't they? You faced them before." Kale's face grew grim. "They were once my comrades. When I defected, they were ordered to hunt me down. I barely escaped. But now we're ready." Chapter 3: Ambush in the Hardon Expanse. The plan was set. Kale's forces would lay hidden among the asteroid belt, cloaked by Thad's prototype devices, waiting for the Judicators to arrive. Days passed in tense silence, the crew's nerves strained by the anticipation of battle. Finally, the Judicators arrived, their sleek, dark ships cutting through the asteroid field. They moved with precision, their formation tight, clearly underestimating the human colonies. Kale knew that the Judicators wouldn't give up until they torn through every last resistance. Sully unless he gave them no other choice. Execute Phase 1, Kale commanded over the comms. The first wave of cloaked human ships dropped from their hiding places, firing at key weak points in the Judicators' fleet. The initial surprise worked. Several Judicator vessels were damaged, and their formation broke. Kale and Jessa led the charge, maneuvering through the treacherous terrain with expert precision. But the Judicators quickly adapted, launching countermeasures and closing in with relentless, almost mechanical precision. Kale engaged in a brutal dogfight with one of their lead ships, his reflexes honed from decades of combat, while allies coordinated the fleet's movements, ensuring they stayed out of the Judicators' deadly firing arcs. Chapter 4: A Deadly Duel. The battle dragged on, both sides refusing to back down. Kale found himself face to face with the Judicator leader, Commander Voss, an imposing figure with cybernetic enhancements that made him nearly unstoppable. Voss was a grim reminder of what Kale could have become had he remained loyal to the autocracy. The two combatants clashed, their energy blades illuminating the dark asteroid field. Voss fought with ruthless efficiency, each strike calculated to exploit any weakness. Kale countered, drawing on his years of experience, using Voss' aggression against him. But Voss' augmentations gave him an edge, and Kale soon found himself struggling to keep up. "You were a legend, Kale," Voss taunted, delivering a punishing blow that sent Kale reeling. "But even legends can be erased." Kale's vision blurred, but he stood his ground, determination blazing in his eyes. "You may erase a legend," he replied, voice resolute, "but you'll never break what it stands for." With a final, desperate surge, Kale disarmed Voss, knocking him back with a blow that sent him tumbling into the void. The Judicators' fleet faltered, their leader lost, and the Vanguard seized the moment, routing the remaining Judicators in a coordinated assault. Chapter 5: The Road to Unity. With the Judicators defeated, Kale returned to the Resonance, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. The victory reverberated across the colonies, and the Resistance Vanguard grew stronger with each passing day. Colonies that had once stood isolated now pledged allegiance to the Vanguard, sending ships, resources, and fighters to join the growing rebellion. But Kale knew the autocracy would retaliate, and that this was only the beginning. He gathered his allies, speaking to them from the heart. "We've won battles," he began, his voice carrying through the gathered crowd, "but the war is far from over. Our strength lies in our unity. We will build, we will defend, and we will endure. The autocracy's empire is vast, but its heart is hollow. It thrives on fear, but we are stronger than that." Humanity's vanguard had united the colonies, forging an alliance that spread like wildfire through the outer rim. Kale Draenor, The immortal Steel Commando had become a living legend, a figure who symbolized both humanity's resilience and its defiance against the tyrannical Asterian autocracy. But with each victory, the stakes grew higher. Kale knew that the autocracy would soon shift its focus to a full-scale counteroffensive to crush the vanguard once and for all. Their next target was Iron Reach, a fortified autocracy stronghold rumored to house not only military resources but also high-ranking autocracy officials and scientists overseeing experimental tech. If Iron Reach fell, it would cripple the autocracy's operations on the Outer Rim, giving the vanguard a powerful foothold, but it would be their hardest battle yet. Chapter 1: A Message Intercepted. As preparations for the assault began, the vanguard intercepted an encrypted message from Iron Reach. The message was marked with a high clearance level and contained references to Project Rebirth. Kale's expression darkened as he deciphered the text. Project Rebirth, it's a resurrection program, Kale said grimly, turning to Commander Allies Vega and Jessa Thorne. The autocracy has been working on a method to resurrect fallen soldiers through advanced cloning and memory transfer. They want to bring back the Judicators we defeated and maybe even mass-produce them. Jessa's eyes widened. If they succeed, they could send an endless wave of commandos against us. Kale's jaw tightened. Then we end it here. Iron Reach isn't just a fortress, it's the heart of their cloning facilities. If we destroy it, we cripple Project Rebirth and give humanity a fighting chance. Chapter 2: The assault begins. Under Kale's command, the vanguard mobilized every ship, fighter, and trooper they could muster. Engineers like Thad have been hard at work outfitting their fleet with Thad's stealth and targeting tech, but Iron Reach would require an all-out assault. The vanguard's fleet arrived at the edge of Iron Reach sector, dark and silent against the starry void. They held formation, waiting for the signal. Commence attack. Kale's voice echoed through the comms, and the vanguard's fleet sprang into action. A barrage of lasers and missiles illuminated the sky as vanguard forces descended on Iron Reach's defenses. The autocracy stronghold responded swiftly, its turrets and drones pouring defensive fire upon the invading fleet. The vanguard's ships wove through the chaos, dodging debris and enemy fire. Kale led the charge, his battle-hardened commando instincts guiding his every move. As they closed in on the fortress, Kale's assault team breached Iron Reach's outer wall, blasting their way into the heart of the stronghold. Chapter 3: Facing the Reborn. Inside Iron Reach, Kale and his team faced fierce resistance. The hallways were patrolled by genetically enhanced soldiers and automated drones, all under the control of a central AI known as Directive Alpha. As they fought their way deeper into the fortress, they encountered a horrifying sight: rows of pods containing cloned bodies, each one an exact replica of a Judicator. They're already operational, Kale muttered, watching the pods glow ominously. One of the clones, fully awakened, stared at him from the other side of the glass with eyes as cold and merciless as those of Commander Voss, the Judicator he defeated in the Hardon Expanse. The vanguard forces braced for battle as the clones began emerging from their pods, fully armed and driven by Directive Alpha's commands. The cloned Judicators attacked with terrifying efficiency, pushing Kale's team to their limits, but Kale fought with renewed intensity, fueled by the knowledge that if they fell here, the vanguard would be overrun by the reborn Judicators. Hold the line, Kale shouted as he engaged a clone of Voss, their blades sparking in the narrow corridors. He moved with a practiced rhythm, dodging strikes and finding weak points in the clone's defenses. Behind him, Jessa and allies directed the vanguard troops, coordinating strikes and reinforcing their position. Chapter 4: Breaking the Chains. As the battle raged, Kale's team located the control center of Directive Alpha. The central AI was the brain behind Project Rebirth, and as long as it was active, the clone Judicators would continue to fight and more would awaken. Shut it down, and we shut down the clones, Alice said, determination gleaming in her eyes. But how do we get to it? Kale scanned the room, noting the array of defenses around the AI core. The only way in is through those plasma shields, and they'll fry anything that gets too close. He paused, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Unless I create a distraction. Before anyone could protest, Kale charged forward, drawing fire from the automated defenses. As he weaved between energy blasts, he smashed through the lines, dodging and firing with precision, creating enough of an opening for Jessa and allies to bypass the defenses and hack into the core. With one final surge, Jessa uploaded a virus into Directive Alpha, destabilizing its protocols. As the AI systems glitched, the clone judicators faltered, their movements slowing as the control link wavered. Taking advantage of the momentary weakness, the Vanguard forces unleashed a concentrated assault, breaking through the remaining clones and pushing forward. Chapter 5: The Fall of Iron Reach. As Directive Alpha's systems crashed, Kale and the Vanguard stormed through Iron Reach, leaving no room for retreat. They set explosive charges in the cloning labs, in the weapons storage, and in the fortress power core. Kale's eyes swept over the destruction as they prepared to leave. The fortress had been a place of oppression, the site where countless human lives were altered or ended for the autocracy schemes. Now, it would stand as a symbol of resistance. Mission accomplished, Kale said into his comms. Fall back, let's give them a show. The Vanguard ships pulled back from Iron Reach, their engines roaring to life as they soared into the starry skies. Seconds later, the fortress erupted in a massive explosion, the shockwave radiating outward like a beacon of defiance. The destruction of Iron Reach and Project Rebirth was a massive victory for the Vanguard, but the autocracy's grip on humanity was far from broken. In the wake of Iron Reach's fall, the autocracy's supreme executor declared a state of emergency and ordered a brutal counterstrike. Human colonies that had openly joined the Vanguard were mercilessly attacked, entire planets subjected to orbital bombardment to instill fear and obedience. But for every planet that fell, 10 more rose up in defiance. Kale Draenor, the immortal Steel Commando, had ignited a spark that couldn't be extinguished. Now, with the autocracy doubling down on its efforts to quash the rebellion, Kale and his allies set their sights on their most dangerous mission yet, infiltrating the autocracy's capital system, Asteris, and bringing the fight directly to the Supreme Executor. Chapter 1: The Heist. Kale assembled a team of Vanguard's elite for a daring mission, obtaining critical data about Asteris, the heart of the autocracy. The Vanguard needed intel on the autocracy's defenses and leadership structure, but the data was stored in the most secure vault in Autocracy Space, an encrypted archive on Xerix Prime, an autocracy-controlled planet known for its impenetrable security and brutal overseers. The plan was risky: infiltrate Xerix Prime under the guise of an autocracy escort, bypass layers of security, and escape with the data. Jessa Thorin, Kale's tactical expert, devised the plan and would lead the infiltration alongside Kale and Commander allies Vega. As they approached Xerix Prime, their ship disguised as an autocracy transport, tension filled the air. Remember, in and out fast, Kale reminded the team, his voice calm but firm. This is a fortress, and they'll have no mercy if they find us. Disguised in autocracy uniforms, the team moved quickly, navigating the labyrinthine corridors of Xerix Prime's archives, their cover held. But just as they reached the data vault, alarms parade a security breach had been detected. Their only option was to fight their way out. With swift, precise movements, the team took down guards and dodged security drones. Kale grabbed the encrypted data core, and they raced for the exit, battling their way through waves of reinforcements. Just as they reached their ship, allies covered their retreat, holding off pursuing guards until the last possible second. The team barely escaped Xerix Prime, but they had what they needed. Chapter 2: The Capital Under Siege. Back on the Resonance, Kale and his allies decrypted the stolen data. Asteris was heavily fortified, protected by an array of planetary defense grids and the autocracy's elite fleet. But the data revealed something surprising: the secret orbital station known as Celestis, orbiting on the outskirts of Asteris. Celestis was the autocracy's main communication hub, connecting the Supreme Executor's orders with military commands across the galaxy. If the Vanguard took control of Celestis, they could cripple the autocracy's command structure, leaving Asteris vulnerable. The mission was clear: a full-scale assault on Celestis to disrupt the autocracy's communications and open a way to Asteris. With the Vanguard fleet mobilized, they jumped to the Asteris sector, launching a surprise assault on Celestis. Kale led the charge, coordinating strikes from his command ship, as Vanguard fighters engaged Autocracy defenders in a brutal space battle. As the Vanguard fleet pushed through, Kale's team boarded Celestis, working to override its communication arrays. The fight was intense, but Kale's determination held them together. They succeeded in severing Celestis' link to the Autocracy's network, sending a shockwave of chaos through the Autocracy's ranks. Without the Supreme Executor's commands, the Autocracy's fleet stumbled, giving the Vanguard a crucial advantage. Chapter 3: Into the Heart of Asteris. With Celestis disabled, the Vanguard seized the moment to infiltrate Asteris itself. But the capital world was like nothing they'd encountered before. A sprawling, glittering metropolis encased in shields and guarded by an army of drones and soldiers. The streets were lined with propaganda, statues of the Supreme Executor towering over every corner. But beneath the city's surface, rumors of unrest festered. The people of Asteris had grown weary of the Supreme Executor's rule. Kale's team connected with an underground resistance group known as the Veiled Blades, a clandestine faction of civilians who had long awaited a chance to rise against the Autocracy. The leader of the Veiled Blades, a former military officer named Tyra, met Kale in a hidden bunker beneath the capital. "The people of Asteris are ready to fight," Tyra said, her voice unwavering. "We just need a signal. If you can breach the central command tower, we'll rise up and take the streets." Kale nodded. "We'll give you that chance, but once this starts, there's no turning back." Tyra's eyes were fierce. "We've been waiting too long for this moment. The Veiled Blades stand with you." Chapter 4: The Supreme Executor. The Vanguard and the Veiled Blades launched a coordinated attack on the command tower, Kale leading the charge. As they fought their way up, Autocracy forces met them with unrelenting resistance, but the Veiled Blades had the advantage of surprise. Civilians joined the uprising, filling the streets with chants of defiance. As Kale reached the top of the command tower, he confronted the Supreme Executor, clad in a gleaming suit of power armor. The Executor was a towering figure, exuding an air of absolute authority. His voice echoed, cold and unfeeling. "You could have been a hero of the Autocracy, Kale Drainer, but you've chosen the path of treason." Kale's gaze was steady. "Heroes don't serve tyrants, and neither will humanity." The two clashed, the Supreme Executor's power armor amplifying his every strike, forcing Kale to fight with every ounce of skill and strength he possessed. The battle was brutal, but Kale's unbreakable resolve gave him the edge. With a final, devastating blow, he broke through the armor's defenses, bringing the Supreme Executor to his knees. The people of Asteris watched as Kale, victorious, raised the flag of the Vanguard from the command tower. Across the city, cheers erupted, the capital falling into the hands of the people.